He's looked. I mean, it's not always that Is It Phoenix is the hero, but Jake Conan has certainly played heroically today.
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned the leaderboard. I just wanted to, shout out Jake Conan real quick. Very, very high up on the leaderboard. So Jake is someone who
Yes.
is very interested in those points. I mean, all of our players are, but with how high Jake is on the leaderboard, definitely a lot more to play for. So, as far as this matchup is concerned, this is kind of the classic, I guess. If you've been playing Pioneer for a long time, you've probably seen Phoenix versus Rakdos in some form or fashion. Now, previously, these Rakdos decks have looked a lot different, right? They've had Graveyard Trespasser, they've had more Shield Rids, Archfiend of the Draw. So there's been so many different iterations of Rakdos.
Yeah.
And I think specifically with this version, the introduction of Unholy Annex providing you a 6/6 flying creature, part of the reason that they were playing Archfiend of the Dross before was the fact that it didn't die to Lightning Axe. And Unholy Annex provides you a creature that doesn't die to Unholy or Lightning Axe rather, but
Uh-huh.
also, the 3 mana half of that can provide you some, card advantage plus a little bit more pressure as well.
I also, historically, the Rakdos deck in Pioneer has just been kind of fascinating, right? Ever since probably the printing of like a Blood Tithe Harvester. Uh, it's gone back and I mean, at one point, remember, it wasn't Rakdos Demons, it was Rakdos Vampires. That
Hmm.
was the Rakdos deck of the format, to the point that Vein Ripper was banned. Channel Fireball broke the Pro Tour format with that one at some point in I don't know, 2023, maybe it was early 2024 at this point. And now we've come all the way around to we're not a vampires deck, we're a demons deck.
Yeah, rip Soren for rip to the vampire enjoyers who no longer get to play their
Oh,
Sorens.
you're right.
But
It might have been Soren that got banned, right? Instead of Vein Ripper. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they didn't want to ban the new card, which I understand. But there were definitely some, before Vein Ripper, there was some cool Soren decks that, can no longer be played. But speaking of vampires, there's one, Blood Tithe Harvester, kind of the, as we see the namesake card here for Jake. And this is exactly what you're looking for if you're Jake Conan, because Rakdos, not really good at answering enchantments in the battlefield. So that artist talent is going to remain there for a while and provide Jake a ton of advantage. And because we are in a game one scenario, doesn't have to worry about any graveyard hate. So can kind of just, sort of go all in and doesn't really have to think about, curses and ley lines and all that stuff.
All right. Kind of a slow to after watching Jake play against Mono Green last round and having all kinds of creatures and removal spells in the first 2 turns. This one is downright peaceful by comparison. Is a decent setup here. We see one
Eh,
Phoenix, at least in the yard here for Jake.
turn four is not going to be very peaceful though.
Yeah.
This is
Starts
this
with
is
a
where it's going to be. This is where peace ends,
oh
as we see a second Phoenix discarded, and I think I might have saw a Treasure Cruise there as well for Jake.
yeah.
It might even be Cruise plus Profs, which I guess wouldn't be good this turn because you can't. For those of you who don't know, Profs needs to have a target when you go to combat. So the Phoenixes that you get back from the graveyard would not trigger Profs that turn. So next turn, Profs would be a little bit better, but until the Phoenixes are in play, not going to be quite as good.
Yeah, and I think this is our second spell of the turn, right? So we need
I'm sure he's got one, right? We got to have
yeah,
one,
we
yeah.
do. So all right, so we've got the third spell here, but is this a Phoenix? It's not. So 2 Phoenixes, it looks like.
I saw a red card. He might have actually drawn a Phoenix off of the artist talent. There
One
we go.
away from
Lightning
having a
Axe.
truly, I mean, I guess, hey, look at it this way. Having 3 of them this turn is having Blake's total as opposed to, hitting for a third of it. So
Right.
we'll see if that makes a difference. But Rakdos Demons under the gun here. No Mutavault either for Blake. So that means the Unholy Annex, at the moment, anyways, looking like it'll actually hit him. Yep.
Yeah, that's going to put Blake down to 10. 6 power in play for Jake. Doesn't really have to do a ton to cross the finish line. Some combination of, profs plus a couple cantrips or the third Phoenix, and there's the profs. That's probably going to represent lethal damage. Now, good chance that Blake has a kill spell. But when you're in this position and your opponent has, 7 cards in their hand and you're using a kill spell on an Arclight Phoenix just to not die,
Right.
that's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, I think we were there's been some talk about why wasn't there more Is It Phoenix across the room today? And one of the answers was, well, there's just a lot of Rakdos finding success. But, Jake Conan has just shown no problem thus far. Obviously, this is a game one scenario here. Uh, but he's looked really good in every game we've watched him play today, just putting artist talent mainly to work. Frankly, it's been just a huge, as he called out in his interview, a huge piece of the deck, a huge piece of his success today. And wow, that fatal push is
Oh,
actually not even gonna
well,
work out
he's
how
got
you
two
want
to
it
pay,
to.
but I think there's a second pair.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Okay. It doesn't work at all. So the props actually represents the end of the game. Blake Madsen picks him up. Game one over to Jake Conan and Is It Phoenix.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive. Now, sideboards, Corbin, what are we looking at here? Talk to me. Tell me
We
what's in
want
Blake's
some
sideboard.
graveyard hate, and I think that unlicensed Hearst is probably a good place to start. There's another Torch to Tower in the sideboard as well. There's those Hidetsugu consumes all if you want to even go that deep. A number of options, it looks like, for Blake to fill out his deck with some interaction here.
Yeah, Hearse, Slam Dunk. I don't hate Extinction Event. There could be, there's a lot of these situations and these big turns for Phoenix where they put, multiple Phoenixes into play, sometimes even three copies. And if you can set up a spot where you take one big hit and then Extinction Event, even
Yes.
exile all the Phoenixes, that can be kind of backbreaking. So maybe he wants to go towards that. Hidetsugu is definitely a good card. It's one of those things where when Blake was playing against the Dredge deck earlier, we kind of mentioned this where Hidetsugu being graveyard hate on suspend can be kind of awkward because
Right.
the Phoenix deck can just wait to deploy, like wait till after the Hidetsugu resolves or have the Phoenixes before you even get to chapter two. But the fact that it exiles all graveyards and cuts Jake off of a future cruise the next turn, definitely something that Blake wants.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at the Phoenix sideboard here and talk about it again. And when he plays against Rakdos, this is very different challenge than the mono green we saw last round. But I'm not sure how much you want to change anything here. Nothing, is going to majorly change from your opponent between game one and game two. So you probably just want to figure out how you can interact with that. So is this where we want to go wide with the tokens, Devin?
I think so. So there's a couple of interesting things that Jake has here. So first and foremost, the Brazen Barbers. I think those are actually quite good. We talked about how Unholy Annex creating a 6/6 token.
Right.
Jake doesn't have a lot of ways to answer that on a one-for-one basis. Barber is one of the good ways to do it because you get to answer the demon token and then have an additional threat later on. So I think that one's pretty good. I do think Jake wants to go towards the Iconoclast because if you expect Blake to board out a lot of fatal pushes, that makes the Iconoclast better. And then after that, knowing about the hearses, you probably want the Abrade and the Prismari command as well.
Yeah, and also, knowing your opponent has a lot of graveyard hate anyway is going to make you want to favor the iconoclasts as well, I think, in that scenario. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of nothing is going to be drastically different in that the it's not all about the arc like phoenixes in this one because the iconoclasts are going to come in. It's not going to be all about one angle. It's not where we saw the dredge deck earlier, and if your opponent has the graveyard hate, well, then that's what the game's going to be all about. It's not going to be that kind of dynamic. I think we're going to see a lot of back and forth here, as both players have plenty of card advantage, card selection, and removal for each other. So stop me if you've heard this one before, but Treasure Cruise kind of an important card in this kind of matchup.
Oh, you don't say. Is that card good or something? It cost 8 mana. How good can it be?
That's a great point.
Yeah, that's it's kind of wild to me how Cruz has just been I mean, not really wild to me because the card
Right.
is extremely messed up, but how long it's been dominant. It's been basically since since the inception of the Pioneer format. And it's just a card that keeps getting better and better with more printings, right? Like, Picklock Prankster is not new, but somewhat recent addition to the arsenal of the Phoenix players. They were playing pieces of the puzzle long before that as kind of a less efficient way of milling and filling up the graveyard for crews. But Picklock being able, and I think the nice thing about Picklock is it's mill, so it fuels the crews, but it also is a for the prosthetic memory, which is a huge get for these Phoenix decks.
All right. Well, all information on the table here as we get started. Duress revealing that's an annul there for you, those of you who weren't playing in 2002 or whatever. Next to the talent and the abrade, Brazen Borrower,
Gotta
like Phoenix, and some lands.
gotta imagine the talent's getting taken here, unless Blake has a copy of hers.
Wow.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say unless Blake has a copy of hers, but this is weird because you can't take the annul to resolve the hearse, but if you go
Yeah.
land hearse, then Jake just has the abrade. So maybe that must mean annex then. That has to be what that means.
Well, even so, you were going to be able to. I mean, Annex was going to get through a null if he taps out for talent. So it's a Withering Torment on the talent. Okay.
Yeah, so I think the theory for Blake there was that if you take the talent, Jake is not going to tap out on turn 2 and therefore
Right.
it gets to hold up the annul for your annex.
Yeah.
But yeah, no annex here on turn 3. Looks like Blake's hand, I think, is a Shieldred and a Go for the Throat. It's possible that he had the annex and decided to torment the talent before playing the annex. Okay. Yeah, that might be what happened.
Yeah, I mean that talent is he watched it devastate him in the first game. It also the first talent trigger is I don't know about the most important one, but an important one because it is the one that unlocks any phoenixes they have stuck in hand, right? So
Right. Yep.
getting rid of it immediately makes some sense from that angle. Now again, we see Brazen Borrower, the petty theft half of it coming in pretty important, just taxing mana in a really efficient way for the Phoenix decks to buy time.
Yeah, and I mean Blake knew about the Phoenix too. So definitely wanted to kill that talent before Jake got the opportunity to untap and just put that Phoenix into the graveyard. And we see Borrower here doing a pretty good time walk impression, just bouncing that unholy annex. And now the question for Blake is okay, I was going to say,
Oh,
if you have land 5, do you just make a 6/6? How about a Shieldred instead? And that one,
wow.
notably, I don't know if you know
That's
this,
great.
Corbin, pretty good against a deck that draws a lot of cards.
It sure is, especially if you and just being able to go for it there. Your opponent has open mana, but hey, just going to tap out for this Shieldred, even though I just tapped out for something and had it bounce. But this is a good one to stick, and it has stuck through a draw step at least. And Jake is
Ooh.
just tapping out for an arc like Phoenix and coming in through the air. Now, that is 6 damage in the air, which would be a 3-turn clock, except untapping with Shieldred means Blake gains some more life.
Yeah, and I mean, if Blake wanted to, you could even just say, okay, we're gonna go for a hearse here. If Blake wanted to, you could even just go annex, animate mutavault, end step, drain you for 2, gain 2 off annex, trigger shielded, gain 2 more. So you've effectively gained 4 life off of the turn
Mm,
cycle plus the 2
right.
from the draw step. You've basically just negated Jake's last turn.
Yeah, the hearse probably slamming the door here.
Yeah, I mean, Jake is gonna need a lightning axe, and he's gonna need a lightning axe fast.
Okay, it's a talent
Not great against
coming
the
down first.
shieldred.
Jake's laughing. I don't know if there's going to be what we needs following this up.
Yeah, Jake goes to cast a spell, and Blake just points to the artist talent, like, "Hey, you want to do that? I'll let you." Tricky spot here for Jake. We're down 1 bounce spell. We do know that there are still 2 more borrowers and 1 into the Floodmaw in the 75, along with the 3 copies of Lightning Axe. But yeah. Other than that, there's really not a ton else here that Jake can really do.
Yeah,
Ugh,
just
leveling up
leveling it
talent.
up.
That's tough.
Yeah, that's an acknowledgement that we don't have any of those things to do. So now Blake untaps, gets to go up to 13 life. He's got to feel ecstatic about his position in this one, trying to even things up here in the semifinals. He's got the hearse untapped. Shieldred gets in there.
Yeah, we know
The
about the
follow up
annex.
is that annex, and then we're going to activate Mutavault here. So just a huge life swing.
Yeah, this should have Jake going to 2 to 4 from the he goes to 2 goes to 4 from the annex, then 2 from the draw step. So this is quite literally his last turn to do anything, and
And
it
he
can't
has
even
to
be a can
start.
into an axe. It just has to
Yeah.
be the lighting axe.
Yeah, so it has to start with the removal. Okay, there we go. Yes, the trigger was caught. 2 life is for Jake.
Oh, the hidden mode of artist talent. I forgot about this. So, artist talent level 3 doesn't usually come up, which is why we don't talk about it very often. But level 3 says if a source you control would deal non combat damage to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2.
It worked.
So, a braid, math time, Corbin, a braid
Yeah.
deals 3. What's 3 plus 2? I think
Hmm.
that's 5.
I think it means, I think it equals the end of Shieldred here. Yeah,
Okay.
Shieldred hitting the graveyard. Big play for Jake. Well,
Yeah.
the secret mode, as you said, and it the last possible moment because he's at 2 life.
Well, the problem is he's still dead to Annex. So,
And he dies to it. No answer was forthcoming to that. And we go on to game 3.
yeah,
Semifinals.
really,
Here are
really
the match, which
interesting
yeah, go ahead.
really interesting game there. I think specifically like that turn one decision from Blake on the duress really sculpted the entire game, right? Had the
Mhm.
opportunity to take the artist talent, decided not to, decided to take the annul to protect the unholy annex that he was going for. And made a lot of sense the way that game played out. Looked that unholy annex is kind of what won Blake the game.
Yeah,
Well,
and by
with the
getting
shielded
him
too, I guess.
by getting him to play the talent on turn 2, you're then able to hit it immediately on turn 3 before he's able to get any value, out of it at all. So, yeah, really nicely, done by Blake there, and I mean, we've seen him on camera a couple times today piloting the Rakdos Demons deck, and we've seen him win via combat. We've seen him win via not combat and just draining, and that honestly seems to be how a lot of these victories are coming. If you go in on Shieldred and Unholy Annex, that's a lot of drain you stack up on your opponent, because even if they get rid of one of them, the idea is you kind of stick the other one, it adds up. And if the rest of your spells keep you alive, which the Rakdos deck spells do, I think that plan kind of gets there. It's a really a different, I don't know if it's, I want to say alternate win condition, but it really has added an additional line of pressure to the Rakdos deck that wasn't there before.
Yeah, absolutely. And, all-star of that game, of course, Shieldred. Um, still good. After all these years, if your Phoenix opponent cannot kill a Shieldred, they can and will die to it.
Yeah,
And only 2 copies of Shieldred in Blake's deck. I think I want to say it was Harrison who I believe had
was
4
on
copies
four
of
of them.
Shieldred.
Yeah.
So yeah, Shieldred is definitely still a force to be reckoned with. If you don't have the kill spell, it is going to take over the game. And a lot of the ways that you would normally associate like cantripping to try and draw your way out of it to find that kill spell, it's just going to make you take more damage. You can't really cast the treasure cruise into a Shieldred. You're just going to die.
Yeah, that's what gets the Phoenix deck that relies so much on having access to cards throughout its deck and the ability to churn through your deck and find the particular cards you need. It's the trade-off you make for so much of your deck being, what some people might term air, right? Where it just kind of draws you more cards, like you're free the phase, that sort of thing. Those spells, that's not necessarily free the fade, but your cantrips, all of that just falls apart in the face of a shield dread. So you have to have the answer basically immediately, or you're not going to be able to dig to find it very effectively.
All right, game three.
Both players taking a mulligan here. Obviously, we know that the Phoenix deck can mulligan effectively, and for the Rakdos deck, a couple land drops and removal spell or two that are interchangeable. One of those mid-range value cards, whether it's an Annex or a Fable, and you can generally be pretty happy with a hand of 6 here.
Game three, Jake on the play. I'll put you on the spot, Corbin. Who you got?
I got the Phoenix player,
All
100%.
right. Yeah, I think on the play, it's just, play draw matters so much in these types of matchups where both players have these kinds of enchantments, artist talent on one side, unholy annex on the other. And there's so much value in getting to deploy that a turn ahead of schedule, basically,
Yeah.
before your opponent can, do something similar. And I agree. And now we'll have to see discard spell for a
Oh,
talent,
here we go. We'll
maybe.
find out.
All right. So that's the kind of the same decision as last game, right? Talent or a null.
Yeah, we don't lose this time to Shieldred though with that lightning axe there, and that is
Well,
might
actually, never mind.
we might be telegraphing a Shieldred 3 turns from now by taking that lightning axe.
Yeah, if you're willing to take the axe over the talent or the annul, because last game I assumed that Blake was going to take the talent because he
Mhm.
doesn't want to play against it.
Oh,
This game, ooh, I love that. So this is exact kind of remember what you were talking about last game
right.
where Blake decided to leave Jake or had the opportunity to leave Jake with the annul, knowing he's going to tap out for the talent on 2 and then gets to resolve the hearse. That's kind of exactly what happened here, where Blake doesn't have to take the annul because he knows that Jake is going to tap out front turn two for the talent, gets to resolve that hearse ultimately.
And I'm curious, I didn't catch what Jake drew on turn 2 there. Um, you could have left a null up and played uh talent plus a null up on turn 3 if you didn't catch a target, if you specifically wanted to play around hearse there. Um, because talent obviously still very good, but without that Phoenix that you were originally planning on, now we're looking towards the other modes with it, which are still good, clearly, but less free than just getting back Phoenixes, and that's why Jake's going to hardcast one instead.
Beatdowns. Yeah,
Yeah,
no point in putting it in the graveyard because if it goes to the graveyard, you're just going to end up getting it under the hearse. Presumably, this is a shield red. Yeah, okay. I was
needs
going
a
to say,
props or something here, right? That's where these alternate
well,
win conditions can come in. Well, maybe not
Prof's,
props,
yeah,
huh?
Prof's
Props
not looking
after
so great against the
removal.
shield red. Yeah,
We
and
need
we
to get rid
see
of Shieldred and then find a way to pump up this Phoenix.
yes, yeah, and we kind of see exactly why Blake took that lighting axe,
Yep.
which I guess you would just kind of assume was telegraphed, right? But looking at Jake's hand, having the options of talent or a null, seemed pretty obvious that Blake had the shield red, but we'll see if Jake can find an answer for it. Because, I mean, we might just see a repeat of what happened in game two, where this Shieldred is, when the Phoenix deck is full of cantrips and lots of ways
Hmm.
to dig and find, draw towards its outs. Well, it's kind of hard to do that when your opponent's got a Shieldred in play, as we see a Damping
Damping
Sphere as
Sphere, sure.
well.
All right, we've
Okay.
got the Brazen Borrower, the Petty Theft, discounted by 1 thanks to the talent on the Shieldred. This is in response to the Damping Sphere, I'm sure. Okay, so that's a pretty decent. That's going to unlock a turn here for Jake.
Yeah, the thing is, so we get to Borrower the Shieldred, but we don't have a graveyard, so we
And the
can't
Damping
cruise.
Sphere.
And I guess we maybe could have an if we have a profs plus a cantrip. I think the question was how does the artist talent cost reduction interact with damping sphere?
Right.
I believe it works the way that Jake wants it to, where if your spell is increased by one, like
Just
it
offsets.
would then it would offset.
Yeah. But the Damping Sphere, of course, ramps up as we go. Uh, and we're not able. Okay, so we started with the okay. There we go. We'll see what Jake picked up off of it. Damping Sphere, of course, it ramps up as it goes, so it does really make the turns difficult for Jake. And answering Shieldred for a turn was very good for him, but Damping Sphere makes it hard to necessarily pay off what you've been given, despite even the discount you have. And if you don't have much to do with the mana anyway, and it doesn't look like Jake necessarily
Yeah.
does, it doesn't even matter as we see the talent go up to level 3.
Yeah, that's tough. I
I
think
guess
Jake
this unlocks a number of removal spells against Shieldred.
Yeah, I think the plan for Jake there was to bounce the shielded for a turn and hope to have a big turn where he can
Right.
go cantrip, discard, find another cantrip, discard, maybe get to a cruise, maybe find a profs. But not only did we kind of stop and basically brick off of that, the damping sphere also put a huge stopgap in that where, the damping sphere limits, even with the artist talent reduction, still limits Jake as to what he can actually do.
And is this an attacking hearse?
Oh yeah, beatdowns.
Wow.
Get it in
Okay.
there. No fear. I mean,
I do fear we might have cursed Jake, though. I'll have some fear.
yeah, I mean, what's Jake gonna do? Use the graveyard to cast a treasure cruise? Like, I think he's okay with that. Oh, well, pretty funny here. So, Fiery Impulse, I believe there's exactly two spells in the graveyard for Jake. So, if that hearse was left
All
untapped,
right.
we would not have had spell mastery and
Yep.
therefore would not have been able to kill the shield red.
Yeah, big. So again, you mentioned that you called it the hidden third level of that, and it really made a difference turning on more spells there. The class being able to shoot down the shield grid, and now we don't know. Jake is still obviously behind, but suddenly not quite as bad as it might have seemed not so long ago.
Yeah,
All
and
of the Storm Giants needs what? One more land to activate, if in even a worst case scenario.
two more.
Two more. So
Yeah,
in
they
that
get
case,
six.
still a minute away from that. But
I was gonna say if Jake had a cruise, I think we could have fired that off last turn, but
yeah. Jake down to 6 life though, and the hearse, while it, the spell mastery wasn't taken away, it did get in damage, help get in damage on that turn, and that is why Conan's down to 6 life, can't even swing with his Phoenix. And here comes a Mutavault and the hearse and the token, and just a chump block from Jake is all he has. And the Blood Tithe Harvester, this is Brazen Borrower for Jake. Probably not enough. Board wiper bust, I think, for the Phoenix player here. At just 2 life, he doesn't have it. Fist bump out. Blake Madsen picks up the win. Moving on to the finals here in Madison. Pioneer 5K NRG series. That was a huge win for him right there, right? That was, we both thought the Phoenix player was going to be advantaged on the draw, even if the graveyard went away. We thought those other win conditions can get there. But man, just leaned in on Shieldred and removal. Not bad.
Yeah, and I mean, game two was an example of didn't even really draw any graveyard hate, just kind
Yeah.
of duressed your your answer to the annex, and then eventually found a shieldred later on. And then in the third game, had the duress for the answer to the shieldred, deploy the shieldred, and then was able to back that up with the sideboard cards. So definitely the general mix of like disruption plus pressure, a little bit of both. That's kind of exactly what happened in those post board games where game one was maybe not able to accomplish both of those.
Yeah, Rakdos has looked very good, and now it's going to have a chance in the finals. As a matter of fact, I think it's safe to say that a Rakdos deck will win the finals, given the state of the other semis. So we will see you on the other side here as we head towards the championship of the NRG series in Madison.